So it depends on the complexity of the product, and it depends on the complexity of the manufacturing process. If you have
and
a
the
product
seriousness. Don't forget the serious. I mean, if it's a medical device, it could be a 2-day affair to get through the whole thing.
Mhm.
But if it's I don't know, some other product that is obviously a lot safer, you still want to do one just to kind of make sure that you're not going to be shipping defects, but
Yeah.
it might take just a couple of hours. The point is you get a group of people who are looking at the product from different angles into the same room. And it could be an hour, it could be 16 hours, depending upon really how deep you think you have to go because of the complexity and the seriousness of the product.
We did a PFMEA on a medical device about a year ago, um, and the BOM size on that medical device is about, I don't know, 3,800 parts all up, and it's a medical device, so there's a lot of traceability, there's a lot of control, there's a lot of record keeping that needs to be in place for our customer. And when you do a PFMEA for a product like that, you have to, I talk about the process. The process starts with the customer placing an order, and then we have to place orders with our vendors to get parts moving, all up through receiving material, incoming, job kitting, manufacturing, special processes, testing, calibration, record keeping, the whole thing, the whole gamut. And for something like that, I mean, that PFMEA, that was a couple of days of work for 4 or 5 engineers to go through each and every sub process and try to think of what could go wrong, what are the potential failure modes of all these little sub processes. What could go wrong? How severe is it if it does go wrong? And how easy is it to detect? So, that particular one took, frankly, a couple of days, a couple of sessions to go through. Now, recently, we just did a second generation of that device where the product was very similar. In fact, we leveraged, call it 80% of the parts and most of the same process. So what we did is we did a gap PFMEA for that second generation and just reviewed the differences in the process from old to new and just did a PFMEA on that. Now that only took, I'll say, an afternoon, maybe 4 hours. So that was much less because the scope was much less. But it really does depend on how big the product is, how complex it is, and what the process looks like.
And one of the things that I think is important to a successful session with an FMEA is to have somebody kind of running it. It's not just 2 or 3 people or 6 people sit down around a table and it's giant free for all. But somebody's leading the effort. And up front, you set standards like what's the occurrence number going to be? It's out of 1,000 units that you build, how many of them might exhibit this problem, right? That's one way to do an occurrence number. And you would say, oh, 5, okay, so it's 0.5% of them. And what kind of, that's going to be a 6 or a 3 that you're going to put in the occurrence number, right? But it's important that you kind of get all of that agreed ahead of time, because it's very easy to derail one of these. All it takes is one person who insists, oh no, that can happen. This, if the phase of the moon is just like this, the gravitational pull is going to cause that part to move over there, and then it'll be bad. And there's got to be a reasonableness standard, right? You can't just shut people off. You gotta think about it, but it's all going to be reasonable, because it would be very easy to end up having to do a whole ton of mitigation because somebody was mad that his pet peeve wasn't properly addressed. Yeah. And so you should have someone facilitating this that is good at herding cats, put it that way.
Yeah, that'll even kill. But I will say the corollary to that, and one of the things that I've found in doing these PFMEAs, even the weirdest ideas that are thrown out there, it promotes a discussion. And I've had it happen a couple of times where somebody will throw out an idea and we decide, no, you know what? That's so easily detectable that it's not worth. We don't have to mitigate that. The risk is so low of it being a problem, we don't have to mitigate it. But then they'll finish that sentence with, "Oh, but you know what? This other piece of the process, well, that could be a big problem because we can't see that. We need to highlight that." So the PFMEA really kind of starts as just a discussion of the process, and it is, like John said, there is usually someone who's kind of managing the discussion, and keeping it moving in a progressive way. But a lot of times you have this discussion and ideas just kind of pop up, and people think of different things on the fly that you wouldn't necessarily think about if you don't have that group of people in the room. Remember, a PFMEA is done with different stakeholders. So we've got representatives from manufacturing, engineering, test, operations, quality. Everyone's kind of sitting in the room. So they're looking at this process from a different viewpoint. Frankly, one that pertains to their viewpoint. But when you've got those different interactions, you uncover different pieces of the process that require mitigation of risk. Volume manufacturing, it should definitely happen before that. Like I said, you can do it as early as beta prototypes, but you don't really have an ironed out process at that point. Typically, they kind of run in parallel with a pilot production, because a pilot production run, you're flexing the muscles of that process. You're seeing what it is, and you do a PFMEA kind of in situ with that. That being said, like I said before, the PFMEA is an ongoing thing. It's a living, breathing document. So you can decide to revisit a PFMEA at any point in a product's life cycle. Yeah. Like I said, if parts are getting swapped out, or if there's a new feature added to a product, or something changed, whatever it may be, you can choose at that point to reopen the PFMEA and evaluate that change, that delta in the process, and see if there's any risks associated with it.
Yeah, my experience has been, start the PFMEA before you start the pilot build, and then leave it open and do the pilot build, and then finish the PFMEA. And that way you can hit the real high points, and it will teach you what to look for while you're building. And then while you're building, you'll learn enough else about the process that you can then finish it off. And then I think you get a pretty solid idea of what's going on, so that when now you start to build real production and the engineers aren't out on the floor kind of looking over what's going on, you can trust the process to give you good product. It's engineering's responsibility to cause that PFMEA to exist. The inputs from a lot of different people, of course, but engineering isn't done with that product until the PFMEA is closed out, the mitigation's been implemented, the pilot run is done, and you declare that you're ready for volume production.